Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. What's happening, everybody? I'm Audley Stevenson, and welcome to the most audacious podcast on the internet. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, and I'm appreciative as always that you've taken a moment out of your day and have chosen to spend it with us here, where we continue our ongoing goal of helping you live your best audacious life ever. As always, I encourage you to connect with us through our social media channels. We are on Twitter and Instagram under the handle The Audacious Pod, and then on Facebook you can find us under The Audacious Living Podcast, and then our YouTube channel, of course, The Audacious Living Podcast. And if you click that subscribe button, you'll be immediately notified every time we got new content by way of video that heads your way. So again, I encourage you to like, follow, subscribe, share, tell a friend, join our community. Now, we're going to spend some time on today's episode talking about the importance of small, consistent actions. Now, while they may not seem like it in the moment, but those small actions have the potential to make a world of difference. If you think about it from the standpoint of making a change, influencing others, or just even generally having a positive impact, it all starts with those small little things. You know, once we make those changes and execute them on a daily basis, we have the opportunity to make long-lasting changes that can drastically alter the trajectory of our lives. And so those little things are definitely a big thing. I'm pleased to explore this topic further with Sam Demma. He joins me on the podcast to talk about his work as a professional youth speaker. He's a motivational speaker and spends a lot of time encouraging young people. He's also the co-founder of a community cleanup program called PickWaste. And, again, when we talk about these little things that we can do, he certainly understands that. These small steps can create a ripple effect, which add up over a period of time and really have the ability to propel us forward to do bigger and better things. Sam's goal is to provide students with the tools and strategies they need to become servant leaders in their schools and communities, as well as in their own personal lives, and have a positive effect on the people around them. So I'm really, really happy to have Sam on the podcast. And actually, I want to point out, this is actually his second appearance, but the first one never aired due to some technical issues. I totally own that. We had a great interview, but, the interview got compromised, if you will, and we had to do it again. So I'm really appreciative that Sam was so gracious with his time to sit back down with me and do a sequel, which really was the first for many of you, but this is a follow-up, and I'm glad he did that. But when I think about it, in fact, I actually believe that we had a better conversation the second time around. So, one of those situations where the sequel is better than the first part. So I think all of you are going to enjoy my conversation with Sam. It was a great chat, and we'll see you on the other side. Enjoy. Sam Demma is a motivational youth speaker and co-founder of PickWaste, a community cleanup initiative that proves that one small act can bring about massive change. Sam's goal is to provide students with the tools and strategies needed to become servant leaders in their schools and communities. It's those small steps added over a period of time that can create massive ripple effects. Sam Demma is up next on the Audacious Living Podcast. Sam, welcome back, I guess, to the Audacious Living Podcast. It seems like we just did this, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, Audley. Thank you so much for having me. It's cool to see you a second time, so I'm glad to be here.
There we go. So our listeners are probably going, second time. When did I miss the first one? What happened? Where I can go back and check it out? Well, this is the second time. We lost the first one because of technical difficulties. So Sam was kind enough to sit back down with me as we recreate the magic that we had the first time. So this is our second time for many of our listeners. It is our first. So again, thank you for being here, my man.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Super excited.
Yeah. So I mean, it's funny. Like, so let's just kind of go back. I want to start at the beginning for you, right? And sort of the beginning of your journey, in terms of where you started. You're a speaker now. You do a lot of work with young people. I think one of the things that hit me the first when I watched you and watch you work and seeing some of the things that you've done is just your poise, like way you do. So I've got to ask, for you, what was your starting point?
Good question. I think I have to go back. If I asked you, Audley, what do you want to be when you grow up? Back when you were 4 or 5 years old, if you could think back, what was the answer that came to mind for you?
Yeah, I would have told you. I would have told you that I wanted to be a comedian. I'm telling you. I'm honestly, no word of a lie. I would have said to you, I want to be a comedian when I grow up.
Love it, right? And if I could go back in time and ask that same question, I would have told you I wanted to be a professional soccer player. In fact, I'm wearing my favorite team's jersey today,
Nice.
Juventus.
Yes.
I'm half Italian, half Greek. And growing up, that was my one dream and goal. And by the time I was 13 years old, I had an opportunity to move to Italy and live there for 6 months of my childhood.
Right.
Live with over 25 international athletes, tour the country on tryouts.
Wow.
And I'll be honest, though, when I wasn't on a soccer field training, you could find me in some local shop eating pizza.
That's it.
And if it wasn't pizza, it was probably pasta. And if it wasn't, pizza or pasta, I was jamming my face with gelato.
If it gets in. All good options, Sam. All good options.
Might have gained about 10 pounds, but we don't talk about that part of the story.
No, we don't.
And, I came home from that experience, not signing a professional contract, but being exposed to what it would be like to live as a professional athlete day in and day out. And I think that was even more important because starting high school, I had this foundation, this blueprint that I knew if I followed, I would give myself a better chance of one day playing professional soccer as well.
Right.
And so all throughout high school, I sacrificed everything in my life. I had nothing like that average high school experience. I had no relationships. I mean,
Right.
intimate, serious relationships. I didn't party very much. No drinks, no drugs, no alcohol. Sometimes kids get around those things. I wasn't a part of any of it. I never even owned a gaming console growing up, aside from the Wii. But we all know that, you use a Wii for 1 week and then you never touch it.
That's right. Well, what that is, Sam, it's focus, right? That level of focus to say, this is what I'm going after. And this is, these are the things this is what I have to do to stay on this path of where I want to go. And to do that at a young age is phenomenal. Because I didn't have that. I'll tell you that for a fact.
Yeah. Well, and it's also sacrifice, right? And when you intentionally give something up in the pursuit of a dream or a goal, I find that somewhere in your future, the sacrifice gets replaced with some form of progress or an opportunity. It might not be what you're expecting, but there has to be an input-output relationship at some point in time.
Yep.
And so, fast forward, by the time my high school experience ends, I'm 17, got a full-ride scholarship to a huge school in the U.S., and it would have been the first step to one day playing pro. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it now, I ended up undergoing 3 major knee injuries, 2 surgeries. I tore the labrum in my right hip, and over the span of 2 years of trying to get back on my feet, made the tough decision that I would stop playing soccer. Wow. And, that was really the foundation and the starting point of my journey, because what followed was a lot of struggle and challenge and overcoming adversity and redefining what it meant to be a functioning human being in society that was worth something, because growing up, I attached my whole self-worth to this sport.
Right.
And then, there was a teacher named Mike Loudfoot that inspired me and mentored me and believed in me when I stopped believing in myself, that led me down the rest of the path.
Right. And the value in those mentors are incredible, and I'm glad you touched on that, because that was certainly one of the things that I wanted to ask you about in terms of the power of mentorship. And sometimes, and I know for myself, there's mentors who I've had who I've appreciated their work, I've been inspired by their words, and I've never met them. I've never had any interaction with them. I've never had the opportunity to ask questions or anything of that nature, but they've had profound impacts on me.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's Ty Lopez who says, your mentors could be books. They could be people who are passed away, right? You could be inspired by their work and learn from what they've left behind. Someone like that sticks out for me is Nipsey Hussle.
Oh, there we go.
And I think we talked about rap a little bit last time, but I'm super inspired by musicians and how they use art to influence and impact and inspire.
Yeah.
And when I think about young people, they're most influenced by people who create art, which is why I'm leaning into creating poems and videos and things that no one knows about yet. So let's keep it low key.
Okay.
But
I won't tell a word. I won't tell a soul.
but Nipsey Hussle, he's inspired me to, one, stay true to myself, and two, to embrace independence and take the road less traveled. And he was all in. In a lot of his rap songs, he says all money in, and to him that means I'm going all in, I'm going all out. And he's someone who's inspired me. And then in terms of mentors that I interact with and know and have a working relationship with, there's so many.
Yeah.
Right? My teacher, Mike Loudfoot, taught me this lesson that a small, consistent action can make a massive global change, and inspired me to instead of focusing on sports, try and use my gifts and talents to make a difference in the lives of others. Right. And it was his lesson in World Issues class that sparked me on my journey, that led to meeting so many more mentors and so many more amazing people.
Yeah. It's so funny. I think about, I had the good pleasure once upon a time of, I'm an old school rap guy from way back when. And I had the good pleasure of sitting down and talking with DMC from Run DMC, right? Yeah. And this is classic hip hop 80s guys. And they had a song called The King of Rock. And I was always intrigued by this hip hop group calling themselves the King of Rock and what that was all about. So when I had the opportunity to ask him, I was like, yeah, DMC, help me understand this. Like, you're a hip hop guy from New York and you're talking about rock and roll. And he was talking about the whole idea of at that time, rock and roll was king. Rock and roll was at the top. So if I were to aspire to anything and be anything, I had to challenge the top. So I called myself the King of Rock. And there's in that boldness and that, again, that level of audacity, that really, in fact, it was one of these stories that have always sat with me because I'm like, wow, that's powerful, right? So again, you talk about musicians and what they can do and how they can inspire you. And I love sitting down and talking to musicians about their artwork because that craft, any sort of creative craft that you've got to open up yourself, to have any sort of real connection with others, you've really got to open up yourself. And I have such an appreciation for the manner and how they do that. So I think, the art form, music specifically we're talking about, is just a tremendous medium, man.
I couldn't agree more. And you just made me think when you mentioned the audacity to be bold and, stake your claim and say who you are. I thought about Russ, who's someone else who's inspired the crap out of me. His real name is Russell Vitale, and he's a huge American rapper. And he was on a podcast with Jay Shetty, and he said, how can you do exceptional things in life if you don't have exceptional belief in yourself?
Yeah.
And it's so true. And it comes down to being audacious, right? I think having self-belief and being audacious are one and the same. And I can't downplay the importance. I think it's so important. Not that you have to be cocky or, share that with the world, but when the lights are off and you're in your basement and you're hitting the record button, or you're writing the speech, or you're shooting the free throws, you're not going to say, oh man, I'm not good. You're going to be the most cocky guy ever, because you need that confidence when you're working by yourself.
You do. Such a fine line, right? Especially in sports, as a perfect example, you've got to believe that you're the best. As a basketball guy, when I saw the fourth quarter come and Michael Jordan was taking on my New York Knicks teams, he knew he was the best. And I was afraid because I'm thinking my team doesn't stand a chance. Here he comes, right? And so it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I love it.
It is. The part of your story that I think it's an important one is the whole disappointment piece, right? Sometimes we've got our plans. Sometimes we've got it all laid out what we're going to do. And that dreaded wrench comes and tells us differently, or gets thrown in the way, and we're taken off our course and off our path. For yourself, do you kind of remember in the moment what the thought process for you when you realized that being a professional soccer player wasn't going to be your reality?
Yeah, it was total heartbreak. You know, I chased that dream for 14 years, you know, since I was 6 years old. And no one told me that my self-worth as a human being was attached to the game of soccer. But growing up playing for 20 hours a week, you know, 2 to 3 hours every single day, having every single person in my family saying things like, you're going to be the first kid in our family to get a full ride scholarship for soccer. And we're going to watch you on TV one day.
Wow.
And I began to carry around these thoughts and opinions of everyone else in my metaphorical backpack of life. And when things were great, those words were support and motivation and fuel to my fire. But as I started to fall apart as an athlete, those are the things that held me back and made me question my worth as a human being. You know, if I can't play soccer, what the heck am I going to do?
Right.
And so, you know, I remember the day after my second operation, lying down on my bed, just, you know, heaving, bawling my eyes out, crying, you know, my parents trying to calm me down, because deep down I knew that the decision was going to be made that I was going to stop, but I was so afraid of what was on the other side of the choice.
Right.
You know, I didn't know what I was going to do. And not to mention, I had some great coaches growing up, coaches that cared about my well-being as a human as well. And taught me things that have stuck with me to this day. You know, I have a coach named Bassam, and he would ensure that all of the players respected the training ground, respected the coaches. When we arrived, we had to shake every coach's hand, even if we didn't know their name, on the field before starting practice. If in the middle of practice our shirt got untucked, he would stop the whole practice, look at you and say, young man, tuck your shirt in. You know, we had to walk down a cobblestone path to get to the field. And if we walked down on the grass, he would wait till we got to him, shook his hand and said, young man, please go walk back up there, walk down the cobblestone path. You know, we don't walk on the grass. We don't take shortcuts. And a coach like that, you know, changed my life. But on the other hand, towards the end of my career, I had some coaches that were not the best. Let's just leave it at that. And who even mocked me, and, you know, whose words stuck with me. And I've dreamt about it for years. Because when you're 17 years old, you look up to your coach. That's a figure who's supposed to inspire you. But to answer your question, it feels like it was yesterday. And every time I speak to a school and I share the story, I mentally go back to those moments. And sometimes it's a little difficult, but I've realized that in life, you know, there's hundreds of games that we can play. Soccer happens to be one of them. We just have to have the courage to press the start button on another game, and we can get the same feelings, emotions, and challenges from all different things in life.
Yeah. You know, as you shared that story about the coach, I started thinking about, you know, whether you're a coach, a leader, even a teacher, right? You can all have an impact, whether positive or negative. And in fact, if you go to most people and say, you know, name your favorite teacher and why, you know, they'll be able to identify you and tell you exactly what it was, what they did, how they supported, how they encouraged you, how they mentored you, and they'll remember all those things vividly. And by the same token, if you said, you know, what was your not so favorite teacher and why? So the two extremes, people don't have a problem identifying. And I think that really speaks to the power of influence that we can all have on one another simply just through our actions.
100%. And sometimes even with young people, and I think everyone thinks this way, but especially students, they think, oh, I'm not a leader, right? You have to, you know, have this crazy title and an MBA and a PhD and an author and do speeches and to be a leader. But the reality is, every time you're doing something, you're taking action, you are influencing the people around you, whether you like it or not. And the fact that you are influencing others makes you a leader, because people are looking at you. They're seeing the things that you're doing. So every single one of us has this leadership embedded within us. And I think that's what makes a mentor so impactful, because they try and pull that thing out of you and you know, pour water on it so that it grows.
Right. And that's a challenge for all of us, right? It's what can we do? And, you know, forget the title, the fancy car, the corner office, or forget all those things. Those things don't make you an impactful leader, an important leader. It's how you impact and you know, make a difference to the people around you. And I totally agree. You talked earlier about the small, consistent actions and the big difference that they can make. And I think that's a great lead into PickWaste and how you got that going. And again, you know, that was as a result of a small, consistent action.
So back to mentors, you know, when I'm going through this tough experience and realizing that I might stop playing soccer, I was fortunate to have this world issues teacher by the name of Michael Loudfoot, who spent the semester breaking down the lives of figures in history to try and prove to us that their results, their impact came from thousands of small, consistent actions that they took every single day.
Yeah.
And he taught us that lesson in the hope that we would understand that our small actions can also make a big difference. And something I loved about his lessons in class is he would teach and then he would say, hey, Audley, for you, this means X. And hey, Sam, for you, this means X. He knew us on a deep level so he could take the content and personalize it to our lives, our dreams, and our goals. And at the time for me as soccer, he would, he thought I was just this kid that was going through and using his class as a way to check off a box on my resume so I can, move on to another school. So he didn't think much of it. But as I was going through the tough time, I started to ask myself, outside of soccer, what small action can I take to make a difference, to see if my teacher is correct? And honestly, I had no idea. Sometimes figuring that stuff out seems super difficult. And every day I would walk home from high school listening to music. And one day while I was walking home thinking about small actions, a coffee cup blew across the sidewalk. And I'm sure you could guess the brand.
Yeah.
After I picked up the cup, I rolled up the rim to win.
And I guess you didn't get it. You didn't get the car.
No, didn't win nothing, man. So I threw it back on the ground. No, I'm just totally joking. But, I picked up this coffee cup and, that's when I realized there's garbage everywhere. And I walk past it on the sidewalk every day. Why not take 2 seconds to just pick it up? And so I started picking up garbage, walking home from high school. And a couple of weeks later, I realized this is a small action. I'm going to keep doing it. Right. And so I did it for about 4 months. And then my buddy saw me. His name's Dylan. And he's like, dude, what are you doing? I explained to him what my teacher taught me. And then in the summer of 2017, we started this organization called, at first it was called the Wastemans. And we thought it was funny because it's a slang term for young kids. And, they're going to want to come help the Wastemans. And yeah, it's pretty good.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So our Instagram page was the OG Wasteman. And, so we ended up getting a speaking engagement at a local church. And that's when we were like, oh, maybe it's time we change the name. And so Dylan's mom came up with the name PickWaste because we live in Pickering and we pick up garbage.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good marketing, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And we just started going outside every Saturday morning, picking up trash for 1 hour once a week. And it gained a lot of momentum in those first 2 months that we never stopped. And so since July 1st of 2017, we've done close to 300 cleanups, filled just over 3,000 bags of garbage. Wow. The initiative was featured all over the national news. We've given out 6,000 volunteer hours to high school students to go towards their 40 hours of graduation. Yep. And the heart of why we're doing this is because we want students to understand that their small acts will also make a big difference. But I believe in life there are 3 buckets that we always should try and fill. Okay. Small consistent actions towards strangers or like one-on-one towards other people, right? Then we have small consistent actions towards the community or humanity as a whole. That would be something like PickWaste. And then the third bucket is small consistent actions to fulfill ourselves. And if we do all 3 of those things, I think we end up building a very meaningful life. Yeah. And so, that's what really started PickWaste. And we still do it to this day. In fact, I have a cleanup tomorrow morning at 10:30.
Wow. You're going back to those 3 buckets. And what I love about that is that at any point you could be adding to those buckets. Like, for example, you may not recognize the actions that you need to stay fulfill yourself because that realization hasn't occurred, or the impact it can make on the greater society because you just haven't gotten there yet. But I think we all kind of so there's not a specific order in which we do these things because they happen as our life evolves and grows.
100%. And I use PickWaste when I speak in schools to prove the piece about small actions that impact humanity. And then I have other stories and examples that fill the other 2 buckets. And the hope is that students will want to give back and be of service, a little bit more, and then also take themselves a little more seriously and decide on some goals and some dreams they want to chase. Because I think, again, everything that we do is an example and people are watching and our actions influence others. Yeah. So I'm going to live out everything that I'm speaking about, so someone else can look and say, wow, Sam left a template. Because I don't hold anything back. I want to share it all.
Yep. What do you think contributed to the momentum of PickWaste to have it grow as large as it has? I mean, you think about all the volunteer hours you've give out, and all the students have participated, and the amount of waste that's been picked up. What sort of contributed to this growth?
Yeah, good question. When we first started, I'll never forget walking into my principal's office. Palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. There's vomit on my sweater already. And I was nervous. I walked into his office and I said, I would really like to have 5 minutes at the end of our Thanksgiving assembly to share this little story and recruit some volunteers.
Okay.
And he was like, yeah, sure. And I'd never done a speech before, and this is 800 kids in a gym. So I was like, super nervous. And he said yes, and I got 5 minutes, and I shared a little story about why PickWaste started. And we got 68 people that signed up after that first speech. And I was like, wow, we just got 68 names and email addresses that we can email to come to our cleanups. What if I do this to every single school in Pickering? And so I asked my principal, I said, hey, you have friends. Can you introduce me to other principals? And I just want 5 minutes at the end of their assemblies. And he said, yeah, you did a great job. Well, absolutely. So I ended up speaking at, all the schools within the Durham region. I did about 40 presentations when I was still a high school student.
Wow.
And we built an email list of like 700 volunteers. So that is what initially got it started. The small action of going from school to school and doing a 5-minute presentation. What continued it is our consistency. So whenever we said we were going to do a cleanup, we never didn't show up. Every single time we did it, we show up, we take a picture, we post it online. We say, hey, tell your friends to come out. And slowly but surely it grows. And then another interesting factor is COVID. Students are finding it really difficult right now to earn their volunteer hours. Yeah. And now that we're back in stage 2, we can meet up with, I think, 25 people outside. Yep. We've resumed them starting tomorrow. And we're expecting a lot of students to show up because a lot of them need the hours and they don't know how else to get them.
Wow. No, that's great. And I love the whole idea of just kind of going from one school to the next. I mean, whether you realize at that moment or not, Sam, you were a professional speaker, right? You were on your way, man.
That was the start. That was 100% the start. And, to give you a little more clarity on how it happened, after about 30 to 40 presentations, I had a principal hand me an honorarium, $150. Okay. And he's like, you did an amazing job. And by this point in time, I was doing about 30-minute speeches. Yep. He's like, you did an amazing job. You deserve this. And, 18-year-old, 17-year-old kid, I'm like, $150. Like,
what I do,
This is crazy, And he's like, well, we pay people a lot more money to do this, but like, here you go, son. And that got me really curious. And that led me to go on Google and search the word youth speaker. And I called everyone on the first 2 pages. And I still have the notes on my shelf right over there. And I asked them questions. I said, a 17-year-old kid, I want to do this. Like, I've realized that this is something you can do and I love it. And I feel like it's a win-win-win situation. Can I ask you some questions? And every single one of them gave me their time. Some of them told me things I didn't want to hear. Others really, gave me everything they knew. And that's what really sparked the start to taking speaking more seriously as well.
Yeah, no, that's I think it's an incredible start, right? Like you can sit down and plan and strategize and say, I'm gonna do this. But what you simply did, you just jumped in the pool. Let's just jump in the pool and kind of see what happens. And not necessarily that was a plan to be a professional speaker, but, and I'll tie it back to the podcast, right? Because you were bold enough, you were audacious enough to sort of, let's give this a shot and see where it goes. And I think a part of that is just being really open to the options, right? So sometimes we don't know what all the steps are going to be. Sometimes things will happen and, we're going to have to decide on the moment, do I do door number 1 or door number 2, right? And you select and you see where it takes you. So that's exactly what I heard from your story.
And sometimes we need to go through a door just to realize it wasn't the right one so we can walk back out and go through the other one. And sometimes it's so scary because when we're making what seem like important, life-changing decisions, we think it's going to be the end all be all. And, I remember the day I called my parents after 2 months of university, and I come from a European family, to say, hey, Mom, crying on the phone, I'm dropping out of university.
Wow.
And they're at dinner with family, friends, and my mom hears me crying. She's like, calm down, comes home. And I explain to her how I'm feeling and how I have this like burning passion to speak to students. And I see the vision and like everything. And, in those moments, I remember feeling just completely overwhelmed. Did I make the right choice? Did I make the wrong choice? Right. I had to go to school for 2 months to realize that it wasn't for me and waste a couple $1,000. It just so I knew, right? Just so I could say to myself, I gave that a try right now. And I figured out it wasn't for me. Then I walked out that door and then busted down the next one, which was to chase the vision and dream that I've been building since I was 17.
Wow. I love it. No, and I'm telling you, like we all kind of get to those realization moments. You call them those eureka moments, those where the light bulb goes off and you're going, damn it, this is what it should be, right? Like this is what I should be going. So it's clearly, what I heard from you. And I also love the power in sharing stories, Sam. Like, our stories, when we could talk about our experiences and our stories and share with other people, we can open up, opening up options and doors is a very similar thing we can do for others. We can, in some instances, save them a lot of time and maybe not them, save them from going down the same path that we had to learn from, or just create new possibilities. And so what if you sort of talk about the significance of sharing stories with one another?
If we think back to, the things that are shared thousands of years ago, they're all in the form of stories and parables, like religious texts, the Bible. There's a reason why they're all told in parables and stories, because we remember stories, because they make us feel a certain way. And when someone shares their story, you might not be going through the exact same situation as them, but as they're sharing it, if they're a very engaging presenter or a speaker or they're a good writer, you start to connect the dots subconsciously on how what they're saying or doing is relating to your own personal situation and experiences. And then what happens is your story either confirms something in their mind, or it challenges something in their mind. Yep. And either of those things are very positive because you're providing someone with a brand new perspective. Yep. And not every kid I speak to faced knee injuries and lost a full ride scholarship and wanted to be a pro soccer player. But every human being faces challenges. Yes. And the way that I overcame mine, they can take the same mindset and apply it to their own life situation. So I'm a huge advocate for sharing stories. That's why I love podcasts. Shout out to the Audacious Life. This is an important project.
Yeah, appreciate it. No, you're right. And I agree with you. And I love the analogy that, not all students can relate to your experiences of losing a scholarship and all the injuries, but the lessons in that, they can apply them to their own lives. And sometimes really cool, you'll sit there, and I've done it too, where I'm talking to groups, I'm talking to audiences, and you can literally see the wheels turning, right? Yeah. And I might be talking about my experience that they know nothing about, but they're still able to connect, and the light bulb literally just kind of goes off. You're like, yeah, that's the power of connection, Sam. That's exactly what it is and where it starts. I
couldn't agree more. I can't wait for shows to be back in person. So after the presentation's over, the kid can walk up to you and say, oh, when you said this, it made me think of this, and thank you for sharing this, or I have a question for you. And I think that's one of the reasons why sharing stories are so powerful, because it starts a conversation.
It does. There are countless times where, and maybe the experience as well too, where you'll share a story and you'll tell, it's a powerful story, and this was a focus, and someone will come back to you and talk about a piece of it that you didn't even think was significant. You might have left out because you didn't think it was important, but that was the piece that resonated with them. And that's what they walk away with, right? Like, it's so you got to share, man.
100%. You never know what someone needs, right?
Yeah. That's exactly it. So speaking what people need, we absolutely have to talk about the graduation speech, Sam. It's powerful. You created a message of hope, of encouragement, of supporting dreams, and encouraging that dreaming and going for the goal, so to speak. You did it in 2021, but you actually did one in 2020 as well. So I want you to sort of talk about that, because we just talked about impacting people. It definitely did impact our young people.
I appreciate that. So last year, when we first got the news about COVID in March, right away I had this idea in my head. I was like, oh my goodness, kids all around the world are going to be missing graduation. Yeah, like they're all going to miss out on it. And I remember how fun my graduation was in my own high school senior year, and I felt so bad. And it didn't seem like schools were jumping on board to figure things out very fast. They're also just trying to get their heads out of water. Yeah. So it was hard for them to organize everything. So I had this just off thought. What if I create a graduation speech for the class of 2020? Yeah. And what if I go to my buddy's house and borrow his graduation gown, get a grad hat, make up a fake diploma, call my buddy who's a filmer, go to a forest and film this speech? And so I spent like a week writing a script and ripping it apart and rewriting it and ripping it apart and rewriting it. And we went to a forest for 2 hours, filmed this talk, posted it online, and it got over 55,000 views on Instagram, another 40,000 views on YouTube, and hundreds of messages from kids all around the world saying, we needed to hear this. Thank you so much. And it was a great project. Yeah. Fast forward to 2021, the US is open because they're a lot further ahead of us in terms of COVID cases. Yep. but Canadian schools are still closed.
Right.
And last year, if you went on YouTube and you searched Dear Class of 2020 or graduating speech for the class of 2020, you'll find millions of results.
Yeah.
If you search graduation speeches for the class of 2021, there's like 4.
Right.
So there's this lack of support, which means there's probably going to be millions of students who are feeling unseen, unsupported, and not heard. So in about April, I had the idea to do another one. And students were commenting on my last year's video saying, can you please make one for the class of 2021? And so I had this bigger idea of having a student actor involved, and we got a team together. My sister happened to be in film, so she got a bunch of her friends and we rented a studio and we built this video. And the reason it's so close to my heart is because the analogy that I use, I think, is so powerful, because so many students believe graduation is the end. And in my graduating video, I kind of explained that it's actually the beginning, and every student has a book. You know, every student is living a book. Whether they choose to write it or not is a totally different story, but every single person's life is like a book, and you happen to be the author writing your own chapters. And you know, every book has sad chapters and every book has happy chapters. And maybe high school was a sad chapter in your book because of how things played out. Right. But the coolest part is that as it ends, you can flip the page, write a new chapter title, and begin writing the next part of your life. Yeah. And so we stitched this video together and pushed it out, and hundreds of schools are using it. You know, you saw it. I think you saw it on the news, which is why we got in touch. But that's a little bit about the grad projects.
Yeah, no, and the analogy of the book is an important one. The idea of writing our own chapters and taking control and consciously sort of, we've got the pen in our hand or the pencil in our hand and we're writing the story ourselves. And, the story only ends when we say it ends, right? Yeah. So, and I think that's a really good response to how we deal with challenges and adversity. So, something bad happens, something unfortunate happens, something outside of our plan. So we didn't want this to happen. We weren't looking for it to happen, but it did anyways. What's next, right? Do you roll over and say, I'm over, or it's done? Or do you figure out a way to kind of get through it or around it or over it so you can get to the other side? And I think that's when we talk about the importance of that analogy. I really, really think it's a powerful one, Sam.
Yeah, I'm writing a spoken word poem right now. Okay. That's going to be a part of a project in the future. And there's a line in it where I say, people are going to say what they say, but unlike Nintendo, your life is a game that you can't replace. So stop searching for the button. And it's true. Like we have one shot at this. And if we're going to alter our path or not chase our dream or our goal because of something that happened or something that someone else said to us, it's not okay. It's not okay. And I'm super excited for the project I'm working on. It's called Dear High School Me, and you'll be the first to hear about it. I'll send it your way because I know you respect that kind of work.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a little foreshadowing as well for everyone listening.
when do you remember or recall when that realization came to you about our life being books, chapters in a book, and again, when I sort of think back to your own experiences, was it then, or did it happen before, or when did you kind of come to that realization?
Well, I realized I've made so many changes. I thought this was my life path and it changed. I thought this was my life path and it changed. I made this life-defining decision and then reversed it. And I realized that my story isn't over. My story is continuing to evolve and changing, and every change feels like its own chapter. Yeah. And so when I was thinking about what to write for the graduating class of 2021, the thing that kept coming to mind was this idea that their story isn't over yet. That high school was, one part of your life, but another part is about to start. And so when I focused on that idea of your story not being over yet, the idea kind of hit me of, well, if your story isn't over yet, then your story also happens to be a book. And then I just kind of reverse engineered it. And as I was writing, that became the theme.
Yeah. I think back when I was in high school, I remember graduating. I wasn't the best student, Sam. I'll put that out there. I wasn't, I probably wasn't the favorite amongst teachers. I was just, that guy just wanted to have a good time and enjoy myself, but I was still able to graduate. And I remember it was at the graduation ceremony. They had a little reception afterwards. I was there with my mom, my little brother, and we were all just, hey, I graduated. It was a big deal. And it was a big deal. It was something absolutely worth celebrating. And I remember my principal, Mr. Barry Sketchley. Mr. Barry Sketchley came along, and I remember him asking me as he was sort of drinking his fruit juice. He said to me, "So what are your plans? What do you got next?" And I looked at him with this blank stare, going, "Next? What are you talking about? There's more? Like,
Yeah.
like what do you mean?" And I remember one of the few times in my life I was truly speechless. I had no idea what he was talking about. I'm like, I just graduated high school. What more do you want? Right?
Yeah.
But there is a next. There's always that next. And it took me a while. I remember actually taking a year off to figure out what that next thing looked like, because I really didn't. And I sort of think back to my high school experience, and a part of me was like, well, why did I have to wait to my graduation day before someone asked me what next was, right? But there's a piece of this, Sam, where we let people know, and we tell people how serious you are about life. And so because I wasn't really serious about school or anything like that, the teachers treated me accordingly. So no one ever thought that I cared about what was next, because I just never thought about it. So that was an eye-opening experience for me, because there always is a next, and the chapters keep going as long as we choose and make that conscious choice to write them.
And what matters most as well is how you see yourself in your mind, because sometimes people won't understand your next or what you envision for yourself, especially in school. Big basketball fan.
Yeah.
Imagine if your teachers judged you on your work ethic every day by how well you showed up to art class and painted murals, right? Yeah. You'd have the worst work ethic in the world, because it's not actually your work ethic. It's the work. It's you're not enjoying what you're doing.
Right.
But if I judge you on your work ethic when it comes to basketball or the thing that you love doing,
exactly,
it's a totally different game. And that's also something that Russ taught me and has stuck with me. Sometimes it's not an issue of work ethic. Sometimes it's not an issue of the next step. It's their perception of how well you are at something that you don't enjoy.
Yeah, nah. Bang on, Sam. This is very cool. It's funny. I was going in this conversation, the whole idea of recreating a chat that we had before, and I'm thinking, but we didn't have to recreate anything. We just had to sit down and talk, and I think it was very organic. One thing I want to ask you before we get on out of here is just and I know you had your alter ego Soccer Sam. I remember you shared that the last time, and I guess when I sort of think about where you are now, and if you were to kind of go back and tell yourself at the age of 16 or 17, this is what you'd be doing, right? This is where this is the impact you'd be having. Here's a difference that you'd be making, or here are all the lives that you'd be having a touch on. What do you think the reaction back then would have been?
No way, man. You'd be at some school playing soccer, hopefully by this point professionally. Speaking to students, what are you talking about? I would have had no idea.
Yeah. And so that for me is always the cool part, because we think we know, right, Sam? There's times where we think we got it all figured out, and the truth of the matter is we really don't. We're just getting started.
Always. And again, that goes back to the idea that we touched on earlier about doors and being open-minded. I was very open-minded to all possibilities, and I will continue to be.
Very cool. Well, look, Sam, this has been awesome. Really, really cool catching up with you again. Quite frankly, people say sequels aren't always as good as the first one. I think the sequel was pretty darn good. So thank you for hanging out with me. Where can our listeners, if they want to check you out, or your work, or catch up with you, where can we send them?
Best thing to do is just search Sam Demma on Google. SamDemma.com is the website, and Sam Demma all over social media.
Very cool. I guess you're excited when we open up fully and we get back out there. We're standing in front of crowds and audiences again. It'll be an exciting time for all of us. I can imagine for you as a speaker too.
I can't wait, man. I can't wait. Thank you so much for having me on and doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
Very good, Sam. Listen, all the best, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Talk soon, Audley.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Yeah. back we are here on the podcast, and big shout out and thanks to Sam for being here. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your insights. And thank you for your powerful message of hope and encouragement to our young people. It's so appreciated. And like I said, you are doing an absolutely tremendous job. Sam left us so much to think about, but if there's one thing I could take away from my conversation with him, it would be this. When you think of Sam's journey and his initial goal of being a professional soccer player, and then the drastic turn that it took because of injury, I immediately reflected on moments in my own life where when I experienced, some form of disappointment after putting in the work, and I'm sure many of you can probably relate to this as well. That work, the energy, the time, the effort, it came at the hands of some form of sacrifice. But here's the thing. When we're chasing a goal or a dream, that effort, that sacrifice that we put in will often manifest itself in one of two ways. You'll either meet your end goal and get that thing that you're after, or you'll run into the opportunity to do it bigger and better. But that opportunity is often disguised in the form of disappointment. So really, don't let the letdown get you down, because there's always more to come. If you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, you certainly can do so by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com, enter in your email address, and you'll immediately be notified every time new content comes available, and you'll stay plugged in. To our listeners, thank you as always for supporting the Audacious Living podcast. Your support is always appreciated, and like I said many times, we do this because of you. So thank you. We've reached the end of another episode. So on that note, I say, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.